Grafting and budding fruit and nut trees are skills that improve with experience. There are few more knowledgeable and experienced about grafting walnuts than Alex Suhan, founder and owner of Suhan Farm and Nursery in Upper Lake, Lake County, California. Alex's career as a walnut farmer began in 1943. He grafted his first walnut trees in 1948. This video features Alex as he demonstrates the art as well as the science of budding, grafting, and correct planting of walnut trees. Further information on the methods employed to propagate walnuts, as well as other aspects of walnut production, may be found on the UC Davis Fruit and Nut Research and Information Center website.
We graft walnuts for the same reason that virtually all fruit trees and nut trees are grafted or budded. We have to get a variety. That's the only way, either budding or grafting, to get an orchard with all one variety of crop. If you were to get 100 walnuts and plant them and let them grow up and start producing, you'd have 100 different kinds of walnuts. Different leafing dates, different qualities, different everything. So with grafting, then they're all identical, they're cloned. Grafting is always done in the spring, and that varies in where you're located in California. If you're in the southern part of the state, in Visalia, Tulare County, you can start grafting the last few days of January. If you're in Lake County, we can't graft until the very earliest, the 1st of May, because of the weather conditions that we have here. Budding can be done in the fall, in August, early September, as well as budding can be done in the spring when grafting is done. What graft you choose depends on the size of the trees, pretty much totally. If they're very small trees that have been planted, well, some trees can be planted and grafted the very same spring. If you have very good growing conditions, very good care, that can be very successful. The probably more normal method is that you plant the walnut seedlings and you grow them a year and then you graft them. If they're quite small, you graft, use a whip graft, and if they're larger, 2 or 3 inches in diameter, then you use a bark graft. Of course, many orchards are started from trees that are grafted in the nursery or budded in the nursery, but we're not talking about that today. I've been grafting since 1948, and I have made many mistakes. And so with this work that we're doing today, we're hoping to help you folks not make all those same mistakes. On the young trees particularly, the small trees that we whip graft, you must keep the weeds away from them. Very, 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 very important. Keep the weeds, and I mean when they're 1 inch tall, not when they're waist high. You must keep them away. And then adequate moisture. Generally, most people believe that you shouldn't water a tree. You shouldn't water a tree after it's grafted until the grafts have started growing quite well, 3 or 4 inches perhaps. The thought is that some conditions that can cause bleeding to start. Actually, trees, when you cut them off to graft them, their moisture requirements are somewhat gone down because you've, especially the bark grafters, you've removed so much of the treetop, there's not much moisture consumption going on. So it's they don't require as much water during that early time as they would if they were still growing as seedlings with a full canopy. We're going to cut grafting wood for walnut grafting. I would point out that this tree was grafted. It's gone through 2 growing seasons. The first year this main stem grew. This last year these side branches grew. And I could mention that this was a pretty big tree because we changed varieties here. And generally you wouldn't have a 2-year-old top on a tree that big. So to begin with, I like a older tree, a couple of years older, or at least 1 year older than this, so that you've had a chance to see the walnuts that it produced. There's been a couple instances in California where they've had some terrible mix-ups and been grafted wrong varieties on because the people did not see the production of the tree before they cut the grafting wood. So a tree a year or 2 older than this would give you a chance to see the crop. And so we want a tree that's growing vigorously, making big long growth, and we usually only use about the base 1/3 of the wood. If you're very short of grafting wood and conditions are ideal, you can use wood a little farther out, but if things are not perfect, you don't want to. This piece is not the best in the world. It's pretty long between the inner nodes, and we like the inner nodes to be a little closer. Now this one is better in that regard. It has a bud here, or a set of buds here, and a set of buds there, and another set there. We also looking for a piece of wood that has 2 buds in each spot, a primary bud and a secondary bud, so that if something happens to the primary bud, you've got another shot at it. And this one only has a primary bud. This one has a primary and a secondary. This one has a primary and a secondary. This one has a primary and a secondary. So it's a better piece. So we would cut that off there and cut it off here. Another problem with grafting wood is that it'd be best if you didn't drop it on the ground, because the crown gall organism can be on the soil, and oftentimes is. And if your sign would hit the ground, you could get it inoculated, and then you get crown galls in the graft union. And I have seen a couple of times where it's been an epidemic in orchards and in nurseries. And so to avoid that, you stay off the ground. So anyway, there's one piece, and then I like this one pretty good, so we'll take it off. And so we only want the lower portion. This is getting pretty small. The diameter of the wood you're using depends a lot on how strong the grafter is. If you're big and tough and strong, you can use pretty big wood, but personally I don't like real big wood because it's just too darn hard to cut. If you're whip grafting, you need wood that's about very much the same size as the tree that you're, at the point that you're going to graft the tree. So that depends somewhat. So anyway, here's another piece. This is quite a bit smaller. And if it's a nice firm piece of wood, I mean nice and round and mature looking, being small really doesn't hurt any. And so we're using about that portion there. Another thing to watch for is that the buds are really vegetative buds. This particular piece has catkins, and there's 2 catkins there. There are 2 catkins there, and there's one vegetative bud and 1 catkin bud there, and then 1 catkin bud there. And that's a real poor piece of wood because the catkins aren't going to get you anywhere. So you have to watch for that. This is a primary and secondary bud both together is what we really want. So then next thing is to store the wood, and if you're just doing a few pieces, you put them in a plastic bag with some moist material in there, moist shavings, or just very few, you can use moist paper bags and hold them in the refrigerator at 32 or 33 or 34, and don't put them in the freezer because that'll probably kill them. If you're doing a whole bunch, you use people store them in peach bins and with moist shavings. We don't want the shavings soaking something wet, but it wants to be moist. And also, most people prefer shavings off of kiln-dried pine. Some of the shavings that you can buy, which is just a bedding mixture, I don't think is too good. This is the tools and supplies that we use when we're bark grafting. We, of course, have to have the saw to cut the tree off. We use electric drill, not always, but sometimes. We have a knife, and we have the hammer, and we have nails, and these are wire nails. They're 1 inch by 17 gauge, and most of our grafting, that's the size we use. On older trees with thicker bark, we would use a little longer nail, but still a 17 gauge. We have here little waters in case we need to dilute our paint or get the black stuff off our hands. We have the sealer, which it's very important to make sure you have the sealer that says grafting on it, because the same company makes a sealer that's just a pruning sealer, and it will not be good on grafting. We have a little brush to apply it. We have white interior latex paint that we dilute about half and half with water, a little brush. We use these little saran wrap type things in our sealing, and they come off of this roll of stuff. Sometimes we use masking tape, and sometimes if there's a problem we use this earwig bait. And of course we've got to have a supply of water nearby. We're going to bark graft this tree, and bleeding walnut trees is the biggest problem to successful grafting. This is an example of bleeding from a pruning cut. Bleeding is caused by the walnut tree's natural reaction to wounding, but is more pronounced in the spring when there is a natural upward movement of sap. The bleeding will cause the graft to fail. The grafts will not grow if the tree is bleeding at the grafting site. If they're bleeding up at the graft union, they're not going to grow. And so we cut the tree down preferably about a week or 10 days before you're going to graft, and we gash it. You see, we put a couple gashes here, and you'll notice they're in there about ½ inch at least into the sap wood. And we made a couple of those gashes a week ago. And so now today, we want to make a couple of fresh gashes because the old ones may have tend to heal up a little bit, and we cannot have any grafting or any bleeding on top. After gashing the bottom, we cut the top of the tree off with a fresh cut so that our graft will be placed into fresh wood that is not dried out. I will cut about 6 inches below the pre-cut, making sure to be careful not to tear the bark at the top. Now, we could cut it here, but the lower you go, the more apt you are to have bleeding problem. And of course, in this area we have a lot of deer, and so we'd like to go a little higher maybe to avoid the deer. Also, as I said, we do like to, want some foliage, leaf surface to help feed the tree, but we don't want to leave any of this stuff very close to the graft site because it will cause competition, direct competition to that. So we want our nurse limbs way down. On many occasions, or some occasions, the only nurse limb that I have on the tree is right here, and I'll take it off because I just don't want it up near the graft site. Another thing that we do oftentimes, if the bleeding is quite severe, is drill a couple of holes in there. And I learned that from Gene Sir, the University of California Walnut specialist years in 1950s. And if you can't get the bleeding to stop, the drill helps there. So this tree we'll put 2 scions on. on a larger tree, a little larger, you'd put on 3, and if it's about 4 inches diameter, you'd probably put on 4. This is wood that we cut during the dormant season, and we've had it stored in a plastic bag in the refrigerator, holding it at 32, 35 degrees. The smaller trees, we use smaller diameter wood. If you have a larger tree, you can use a little larger diameter wood. Now, I'm not too happy with this piece because I notice it only has a primary bud at each node here. It has no secondary bud. And that's not the best situation in the world. We like to have a primary bud and a secondary bud. I like to choose a piece of wood where the 2 buds have secondary buds under them. I cut 2 sets of buds per graft. The length of the wood can be different for each piece. You also do not want the wood too long. Scion pieces with shorter internodes are better. 2 buds plus 2 secondary buds give you 4 chances to have a successful graft. So we make a fresh cut because that wood's been in the refrigerator for several months, and it might be not too good there on the end. So here we go. So a very sharp knife is quite important. And you see we've made that cut about, 2.5 inches long, and it is quite flat. And we're going to make a little cut on the back side, clear through the bark, exposing the cambium layer. It's very important to expose the cambium layer on the back side. We have a primary bud and a secondary bud right under it there, and over on the other side we have a primary bud and a secondary bud. So now we're going to put it in here, and so this is called bark grafting, and this just slips under the bark. No skill required whatsoever. I should say that you mustn't start bark grafting until the bark will slip. The trees have to be growing a little bit, otherwise the bark won't slip. You've got to, and of course, different areas of the state, the right time to graft is different. The actual width of this cut can be a little wider than the sign piece. It's not critical to have a close fit on the sides. There can be an 1/8 inch gap on either side with no problem. If you have it too tight, when you drive this in, it's going to pry up the bark on either side. So, what I say, wire nails, and we put one up here fairly high. We hold this down as we drive the nail in so it doesn't squirt back up out of there. We want it down there nice and firmly. So one nail there, and one down near the tip there, because I consider that very important, that cut on the back side. So, one there. So, okay, so So we did the same thing there. We have a flat cut, 2.5 inches or so, with a cut on the back side that exposes the wood and therefore the cambium layer as well. And so we're going to put it over here. And so there we go. Okay, so the reason that I don't drive these all the way down is that most people, when they make this cut, they don't make it perfectly flat, and so you can see I hope you can see the gap that there is there. So if you don't put it all the way down, it'll still fit pretty snugly there, and that's why I do that. Okay, we're going to seal this now with this black stuff. And pretty important to seal down below here, because sometimes the bark breaks beyond the cut, and if you don't seal a little farther down, you might not get it. So now most people believe that you must come back in 5 days and reseal it because this stuff cracks. Well, we don't do that. We've got a little technique here that we eliminate that problem. The plastic wrap I use is from the narrow rolls used for wrapping pallets, or pallet wrap. You can also use the plastic wrap from your kitchen. It is just a little more difficult cutting small 2x3 inch squares. This wrap has a static attraction to itself and is hard to deal with, but I find that if you drop the small squares in a bucket of water as you cut them, this stops the problem. Now I will show you how I use it. So we're going to stick that on there, and this is one reason why we have that bucket of water nearby, because we end up with this stuff on your fingers. And so then we put another layer, of this sealer on top of that, and you don't have to come back in 5 days and seal it. Again, this is going to do it. So, okay, and then we seal the top. And that's it. Now, soon as that dries, which will be 2 or 3 hours, then you come and you paint the whole thing white. Signs, buds, everything must be white. And that's very important in this spring weather. If it turns off hot, it could, with this black absorbing the heat, it could just cook them in a couple hours. So just as soon as it dries, they should be painted white. Must be painted white. One should be prepared to take care of the earwigs. If you have an earwig problem, they can eat the buds right out of these signs when they first start to grow. So if we think we have an earwig problem, we put a ring of masking tape around there, and we dump in a little earwig bait, and so when the earwigs come, they get taken care of. And this is not always a problem, but it can be a problem. In this area, the tree will push out sprouts here in 2 or 3 weeks, and we must keep them all off, because if you let them grow, they'll compete with the grafts, and they'll can very well starve the graft so it won't grow. So we keep them completely off from this area here. From there on down, we want to keep them under control. We can let them get 2 or 3 times as much greenery as we have here, but we don't. They can grow way out here and then starve the graft out. So we have to keep them under control. These buds usually start to grow in 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and once they get going, you need to decide which shoot is going to make the biggest, strongest growing shoot. And oftentimes there'll be a bunch of shoots come out. We don't want a whole bunch going up because we want a single leader at this point. So you pinch the tip out of these other ones, and if, say, this one has the best shoot, these shoots you would keep fairly short all summer. So we can, because our goal is to have this thing grow 3 or 4 feet above the top of the stake this summer. And so once you get them growing good, we use this green tying tape, and we tie around here loosely, and we do that about every foot all the way up the tree. I grafted this tree last spring, a year ago, and both signs grew, and I encouraged the one to go up and make the tree. And I kept this one rather short, and there was a big branch here, and I cut off. So anyway, I encouraged it to go up, and it went up above the stake, and I headed it back to there. And as I say, I tied them with the green tape all summer long. They need to be tied about every foot. And then for the real strength, I like this baler twine. And one go-round usually won't hold it. And you don't want to just go around here twice, because if you go around there twice and make one tie, if one strand breaks, you lost it all. So with this tie there, if one strand breaks, you still got the other strand. So that's quite important. You don't want them too tight. I mean, too tight here, because in 3 or 4 years that could actually girdle the tree. So you've got to keep them loose so the tree can wiggle and stiffen up better that way. And then you watch and cut these before they girdle. Bark grafting is used to top work a large tree. This would be used when you want to change the variety of a mature tree. Reasons for such grafting could be that a tree is a variety you do not want in your orchard, but somehow got mixed in when you planted. Or if there's a pollination problem, either you have too much pollen and you want to graft over some of the pollinators to the main variety, or you want more pollinators, so you graft over some of the main variety to pollinator. You could also just want to experiment with new varieties. The same graft techniques are applied as I just showed you in the bark grafting demonstration. Each scaffold is grafted over, as is the top of the tree. This is an example of a top work tree. To begin, the tree was pre-cut a week to 10 days before grafting. This is to reduce the bleeding problem and also helps in getting the heavy work out of the way. Leaving a nurse limb is very important. It enables the tree to still feed the roots, and the transpiration reduces wet soil problems while the tree regrows. All the other scaffolds are bark grafted. Multiple scions are placed on each scaffold. The more scions that grow, the better. They will help heal the cut. They should be removed before they crowd out the chosen replacement branch in a couple of years. In my opinion, this is the way to graft a large tree. There are people in the world that would say, oh gee, we'll just get a chainsaw and we'll cut it off here and we'll put a whole bunch of grafts around there. But that's not good in my opinion. In my opinion, and I believe the University of California literature tells you that about 4 inches is as large as you want to get. And if the tree is bigger than that, you just move up higher on the tree or move out farther on the branches. Now that's a pretty time-consuming job, but if you were to do like some people would do, cut it off there and graft it, very likely you'd get it to rot inside, and the tree would have a rotten heart and would eventually maybe break down. It's just not good business. This is quite expensive. If you were hiring somebody to graft a tree like that, it probably cost $100 or $150 to do it because it's slow going. On the other hand, you get a full-bearing tree pretty quickly if you do it that way because you've got all these branches. And you notice again we've left a nurse branch there. This is a tree that was top worked last year, and it shows the care needed after grafting. We have already seen that the whole tree needs to be painted white just after grafting to reduce sun burning. And each grafted scaffold needs to be supported as the new branches grow in the first year. This is done by nailing a long stake to the scaffold and tying the branch as it grows. The supporting stake can be removed after several years. This is the same tree seen in the first shot 2 years after top working. You can see that when done right, top working can change variety and have a large tree ready to harvest in 3 years. If you started from a newly planted tree, that tree would be years behind. The grafts have healed and the supporting stakes have been removed. This year in winter we will thin out the grafted branches by leaving all but one or possibly two on the large diameter scaffolds. The first harvest you should shake the tree with great care so as not to break the grafts. Here's the tools and supplies that we use when we're whip grafting. There's the knife, and I use this tape to tie the graft. I use this sometimes a little bit, which you'll see. I hope that I never need to use these, but sometimes we do. And we use this quite often, electric drill. We have white interior latex paint diluted about half and half with water. And then we have the tree wound sealer. And when you buy this, you want to make positive that this is grafting compound, because the same company makes the same color container that says pruning sealer, but it's not a grafting compound, and it's a very different material and would not work. Okay, this we are going to put on a full, what we call a full whip graft, which means the scion piece is just about the same diameter as the tree. And the proper procedure is to cut the tree off about a week in advance or 10 days, in order for the tree to stop bleeding. Bleeding is the problem with walnut trees. And so about a week before graft, we cut the tree off and we put some gashes in it, and which I did here. And so if you put the gashes in a week ago, we'll put some fresh gashes in it today, you see. And we want to go a little ways into the sapwood. And I should say at this time that the only time that you can successfully whip graft is when you have young trees that are growing very fast, very rapidly. This tree grew quite well. It was planted last spring. If you plant trees in an orchard as a replant situation or an interplant situation where the little trees are competing with the old trees, you should let them get 2 inches or more in diameter and bark graft. And whip grafting is only for very, very fast growing situations. And so we're going to also drill a hole in it here to aid in the, well, and so we've selected a piece of grafting wood, and it has a primary bud and a secondary bud there, and another primary bud and a secondary bud there. So, and you see that piece is just a whisker smaller than that, so it should fit on there pretty good. So we make a nice flat cut there, and about 2.5 inches long. Different people have different techniques. Some people make a pretty short cut, but I don't make little shortcuts very often. So this is about 2.5 inches long. And then we make our little cut here. This is called whip or tongue grafting, and that's the tongue right there. The little tongue, this is going to lock it into the rootstock. Well, so we hopefully have a cut that's very similar, and that looks pretty good, you see. And so we're going to make this cut in this tongue in the rootstock, so that when we slip it together, it'll be just right. I guess I should be pointing out that we're trying to match the layer right between the wood and the bark with the layer between the wood and the bark on the rootstock. If you're matching the outside, that's not going to work too well, because the bark, you see, is much thicker here than it is on this piece that's been in the refrigerator and perfectly dormant. So we're trying to match under the bark, not the outside. And that, it doesn't have to match perfectly all the way along. If it crosses in a place or two, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So we're going to tie it. And I like to tie it very tight. And some grafters, many grafters, most grafters don't use this tape. They use a about 2-inch wide or 1.5 inches or whatever wide plain old masking tape. But I am not comfortable with that. I want to pull it up real tight. To demonstrate how to tie the green tape, I will put a second layer on. First, put the end of the tape under the first few loops of tape, then tuck the finished end under the top loop and pull tight. Cut the loose end. Okay, so now to tie it off, we just go through there. And nothing to it. So that is that's pretty much it. Now we will put a little gum of black on top, and as soon as that dries, in a couple hours, you paint it white. And that white is very, very important if the weather should turn off hot. If it stays cool, it's not too important. So I like to paint them white just as quick as I can. As these grafts grow, the green tape needs to be cut so that it will not girdle the graft. I do this by making small cuts in the tape after about 12 inches of growth. I will show you with a marker where I cut the green tape. I do it so that the green tape is perforated, and as the tree grows, the tree will break through easily, but the tape will support the graft until that happens. If you are using the masking tape, you would not have to make these cuts. We keep all the rootstock sprouts off in this upper area, and any rootstock sprouts down low here, you keep them quite short. Now, there's some difference of opinion there. On the planting in the spring and grafting the same spring, the people that are successful believe that you must keep all the sprouts off all the time. You don't let them grow at all. And some people even believe that with an established tree, that you keep all the sprouts off all the time. And I incline to kind of lean that way. So then again, oftentimes when the buds start out, they'll have a nut on there or two, and then they'll stop and mature up 2 or 3 buds, and 2 or 3 buds will start out. And so if you want to get maximum growth on the one, you pinch the tip out of the other, just leave one go, and you tie it about every foot with the green tape during the summer. We're going to put a side whip graft on this tree. When the tree is a little too small for a bark graft and a little too big for a full whip, we put on what we call a side whip. And so we have the same problem with bleeding on these kind of trees as we do the bark graft. So I left these stubs when I cut the tree off so that I have a nice fresh place to make some fresh wounds so that it could bleed there. Got a little more stuff than I'd like left for nurse limbs. And so when I cut it off a week ago, I put some gashes in here, and you may be able to see it is bleeding. So we're going to have a couple of fresh gashes. Now, a little tree like this, we don't go too deep. And so a couple of gashes there, and we could even drill a hole. A nice little bit there. And we go in there, 1 inch perhaps. And so then we're going to cut the tree off and so this is, as they call a side whip. as opposed to being a full whip. So we're going to get us a scion piece pretty much like all the other grafts, with two sets of bud, with a primary bud and a secondary bud. And over on this side we have another primary bud and a secondary bud. So this thing we're going to do the same way. We're going to cut it down to just about nothing there. And this is the one where you keep your band-aids handy when you're making the back cut on there. Okay, same old thing. We've got it pretty flat. And then we make a little cut. I guess you'd call that a tongue. They call this whip or tongue grafting, so I believe that's what they're talking about. And then we're going to cut hopefully just deep enough to be pretty much that size exposed there. We're trying to, of course, match the cambium layer, which is a layer right between the bark and the wood. The cambium layer is out here in the outer edge, and so we want to make this cut so that the cambium layer showing here is going to be about that width, so they'll touch. So this is a little tricky. This is a rather awkward position to be cutting in. But you notice the width of the bark here at this, what we're doing here. So we've got to match this outside edge with that inside edge. So, or not outside, but this inside cambium with that one. So we need to get that about the same width, and that is not too good yet, but oh, come on. Okay, so now we're doing pretty good. And so if we can put that in that position, this area here will match pretty good with that. So we make this cut where we think that it's going to make it all come out together. Oh, okay. So you see that cut there, and so make that a little higher. So we want this inner between the bark and the wood to end up right here, not out there on the outside edge, but right there. And I'm fairly happy with that. So now we need our tape. We're going to wrap it down, and I'm a green tape kind of guy. Most grafters use a paper masking tape, but I don't. And so some of the folks that use the paper masking tape then put sealer over the black stuff over the top of the paper, but I'm a green tape guy. No, so let's see. We're gonna do something here a little different. Sometimes I use the saran wrap type stuff on that top, and sometimes I use this. So we're going to seal the top with the black stuff, and we can put a little black stuff on there. It may or may not be necessary, but so that's pretty much it. Now the thing is, as soon as this dries, then it must be painted white as we showed before. Painted all white. Another thing to remember that when the grafts start growing, you got to be prepared to keep all the rootstock sprouts off in this area, and don't let these go crazy. Keep them fairly short. And this should go way beyond the stake this year. It needs to be tied about every foot all the way up. And again, this may push out with 2 or 3 shoots, and you need to trim them back down to pretty much one. Pinch the tips on them so that one goes on up. The other thing, when the grafts are out here, a foot or 2 feet, you probably should cut the tape. I don't cut the tape clear off. What I do is in the tape, I make some little cuts just like that in the tape so that it weakens it, but it's still supporting the graft. And then if you put some little cuts in it like that, it will expand and break by itself before it gets too tight. This is a short piece of rubber that is used to wrap the buds when finished. You can also use the green tape for the same purpose. A pair of clippers is needed to cut the graft wood to size. And for knives, you need a double-bladed knife made especially for patch budding. I will show you how it is used later. Finally, you will need a single-bladed budding knife for the other cuts needed. We're going to patch bud this tree, and this is a limb I just cut off the tree yesterday, and this all grew last year, and these buds of course are all pushed out, but back in here is some little dormant buds. And again, we have a primary bud and a secondary bud. With patch budding, you have to have real smooth round wood. You can't have rough angular wood, because when you slip this patch out, you've got to have the heart of the buds still in the patch. If you don't do it right, or don't have the right piece of wood, you'll get the patch out and the heart of the bud won't be there, and the bud won't grow. The patch may grow, but not the bud. So this is just another piece of the same thing. Now there is another way of doing that, of getting buds. You can collect this wood that's ideal in the wintertime and put it in your refrigerator, store it, and then in the spring, that's a little difficult to figure out, but bring it out and keep it in a moist, halfway warm place, not a hot place, and the buds will finally start to loosen up, and the piece will still be dormant, but the buds will slip. So that's a little tricky. So if you can go right out to the orchard and cut the buds, that I think is better. Maybe here to begin with, I'll see if I can get one out and show you up close what the patch is supposed to look like. So anyhow, we have the double-bladed knife. So then we made the 2 horizontal cuts there, and then we make a couple of cuts over here to get the width of this patch. And so I pull out a little piece there because you don't want to pull this patch off, because then you won't get the heart with it. You need to slide it so it shears the heart. Well, there we go. So now, okay. I don't know if you can see from that distance, but we have the heart still in the bud there, and that's a good thing. Very, very important. Well, then we need to make a cut in the tree with this same knife, and get this bud out, this patch, and so we can loosen up the corners a little bit so it'll slide easier, but you don't want to pull it straight up. So here we go with the shearing action, and that one looks very good as well. The opening on the rootstock and the bud you have just cut will match on the top and the bottom because of the double blade knife cut. It is not important that the sides touch. It actually helps tighten the bud down not having the sides touch. After placing the bud in the opening, use a rubber to wrap and hold the bud in. This can also be done with the green nursery tape. And we tie that in same as we did the green tape. When you make these cuts, that weakens the tree a little bit, and sometimes they'll break over. So I like to tie that so that the wind doesn't break the tree off. That doesn't happen too often, but it can happen. So and I like to leave the top of the tree on there when I bud for a week or 10 days, so that things are all happening here, everything going normal. I have seen people bud and then cut them off right away, but that kind of interrupts the healing and the growth and all that kind of stuff. So I believe that you should leave the top on there for a week or 10 days, and then you cut it off about there and put some sealer on top, and I suppose it should be painted white too, pretty quickly. So hopefully in a week or two the bud will start to grow, and so then you keep the rootstock sprouts off as we did on the whip grafts, and we tie the grafts up the stake. There is another time of year when there's a lot of budding goes on in walnut trees, patch budding, and that's in the fall. In the Sacramento San Joaquin Valley, they do that generally around the last week of August and first week of September, and they put in buds, taking the buds off the growing trees right then. They actually would be using this same part of the tree, and they cut the leaves off and just leave a little stub there, and put a patch bud in and put it into the new growth, not the old growth, but the current season's growth, and those generally stay dormant until next spring. So that's entirely different kind of a process. Okay, to begin with, we would want you to keep your tree's roots moist at all times, from the time you get them from the nursery till you get ready to plant them. We don't want them laying around and getting dry at all. The tree might survive, but we want the trees to grow real well. We want them to grow perfectly. And so to do that, we want to keep them moist so that all these little hair roots will not dry up and die. We need to dig the hole about 22 inches deep. This tree measures 22 inches from where we'd like it to be. And if you dig the hole too deep and leave a lot of loose soil in the bottom, the tree is going to sink the first time you water it or it rains, and it's going to end up too deep. When it's all said and done, we'd like the actual field level to be about here, with the roots actually showing. We're going to heap the soil up, though, to cover it well. We got to get that clear, that if you leave these roots exposed, where we'd like them to show in 7, 8 years, they probably won't grow. So to begin with, you must fill them up here quite high. So the hole is dug with a 2-foot auger, and that will pretty much accommodate those roots. Some people believe you should go snip the end off of all the roots before you plant a tree. We don't believe that. So we've got the planting board, and you see we've added some blocks on here to get a little more elevation, and it probably not going to be high enough, but it does. So, and we rotate the tree around, and the hole is never quite in the middle of the spot it should be in. So if we got a longer root, we'll put it where the hole is a little bit bigger. Now, walnut tree will grow, but we want it to grow perfectly. You see, I'm spreading these little roots even. We don't want to plant it like it's putting a string mop in the hole and shoveling full of dirt. We want these roots to look like they were when they're growing in the nursery, if we want the tree to grow perfectly, as good as it possibly can. So, and you notice that we're firming the soil here a little bit, and put a little more soil in, and so, as I say, we firm it a little bit here, and this really, it looks kind of slow and pitiful because we're doing it slow and carefully. It can be done quickly if everybody knows what they're doing. A little dirt there, and a little dirt here, and a little firming there, not a whole lot, a little spreading, and well, now you see the tree is standing up by itself pretty well, so we can take that board away. So we about got it. This is a paradox hybrid walnut seedling, and our plan is to whip graft it this spring. And so we, no matter how careful we are, we've probably lost 3/4 of the root system or more, and so we don't want to leave a full-length tree because the root system might not support it. So we're not on the seedlings. When we don't count buds. When you're planting nursery grafted trees, you count how many buds you've got and leave 4 or 6 or something. In the paradox seedlings, there's quite a bunch of buds. But anyhow, we cut it off about there. If it were see, this is a 7/8 caliper tree. If it was a 3/4 one, we'd probably cut it a little more. And if it was a little 1/2-inch tree, we'd cut it way down. And another thing I'd like to say is that if you can't quite decide whether you should cut it here or here, well, cut it down there. Don't move up, move down. If there's any question at all, move down. You can't cut them too short, really. Okay, so we're ready to paint. This is the crown of the tree, and if we don't paint it white clear here into the roots, and this dirt that we're going to heap up on it blows away, or birds scratch it away, or whatever, irrigation knocks it down, then this is exposed and it will sunburn, and that's not going to be good. And this is white latex paint, about 50-50 with water, and so we get right down here in the roots, and so that's it. So now, boy, I missed a spot, huh? Okay. So that's it. And as soon as the paint dries, we'll heap the dirt up on it. So we just have to wait for the paint to dry, and then we want to heap the soil clear up to here, so that the crown is well covered. I've noticed over the years that if the crown is dry, the trees are not going to grow. If you firm the soil as you plant, the water should not run down there like it went down a gopher hole. I've seen a lot of people that when they plant trees and they put the water on, you'd think there's a gopher hole under every tree because they didn't firm the soil, and there's so much soil collapsing and all that. And I don't think that's the best way to plant trees. The soil was ideal moisture, I would say, so it doesn't need much. Oh, there goes the water down the hole, like that gopher hole I talked about. Our plan is to graft this tree in the spring, and we'll graft it along and make a little fresh cut and graft it, and hopefully it'll grow 6 or 8 feet this coming summer. Sometimes people like to let them grow a year, and then they either bud them this next fall or graft them the following spring. And so if you're going to do that, you're going to leave them another year. When they push out 4 or 5 shoots here, and they get out here 4, 5, 6 inches long, you pick out the one that is growing the straightest and strongest, and maybe the top one and maybe a lower one, and pinch the tip off of the other ones so that you get most of the growth in the one shoot. Otherwise, you're going to have a bushy, fuzzy little thing that the grafter is probably not going to like, or the budder is not going to like. They want one nice big shoot. So now, if you don't prune them to one shoot, the grafter next year still could come back and graft into this older wood, but it might be quite large and they won't like it. I've been planting them since planting trees out in the orchard since 1952.